Hello everyone, thank you very much for joining us at CNEN's second annual virtual symposium, Advances in Drug Discovery and Development. I'm Kevin Davis, the publisher of CNEN, and I'm very happy to introduce our next speaker, Enoch Huang, who is Executive Director of Computational Sciences at Pfizer. Enoch's talk will be entitled Of Soft Drinks and Software, and I'm very much looking forward to his presentation, having heard him speak many times during my years as Editor-in-Chief of BioIT World. Enoch is a leader in the computational biology and computational sciences world in Big Pharma. Following Enoch's talk, I'll come back to ask a few questions. This is a pre-recorded presentation due to Enoch's schedule, so there won't be the opportunity for live Q&A, but I'll ask some questions at the end of Enoch's presentation. A quick reminder, CNEN, as always, does not endorse any particular company or product or services that you may hear mentioned in any of the talks. The talk will be archived on demand for several months after the conference, so you'll have a chance to share it with colleagues if they're unable to tune in on the day of the actual broadcast. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to welcome Enoch Huang. Enoch, over to you.
And good morning, everyone. I'd like to start my talk by posing a question to the audience. Have you ever wondered why soft drinks tend to appear in 12-ounce cans or 20-ounce bottles? While you ponder this deep mystery, let me introduce you to a couple people in my life. So this is my nephew and niece. One hot summer day, they decided to set up a beverage stand outside their home because they had created an original, custom-made, refreshing root beer float. And if you happen to live in the neighborhood or passing by their stand, and you're in the mood to have a root beer float, I think your needs have been met. They sold out every single one of their floats, and according to my sister-in-law, they turned a tidy profit as well. I found out about their little business venture because I saw the posting on Facebook. And even had they known that I was in the mood for a root beer float, there was no way for them to package up their product and distribute it to me. And this turns out to be a classic conundrum for any inventor of a product or a platform or a solution, which is how do you distribute your product to customers no matter where they are? And that's because my nephew and niece did not have access to one of these, an industrial scale bottling plant, nor one of these, a fleet of trucks poised to take the product, the beverage, once it's been bottled, stacked in these trays to the point of sale, which are these vending machines around the world, which of course separate consumer from its money. So my point is that a little bit of standardization goes a long way, because once it's agreed upon the size and shape of the bottle, then you can take advantage of all its infrastructure. In fact, the bottle doesn't care the ingredients of the beverage that it's holding. The beverage itself doesn't know or need to know where it's being delivered. And all the consumer needs to know is where the nearest vending machine is and how to use it. So the answer to my question is that if you have a solution, a product, and you follow certain standards, there's no need to rebuild the infrastructure in order to deliver your product to the consumer. So much for soft drinks. What does that have to do with software, or in this case, scientific software? It turns out we follow a very simple model at Pfizer around a molecular design ecosystem. At the heart of this ecosystem is a computational services broker, which we call CCT. This broker provides essentially the bottling and distribution to the point of sale of our products. In this case, it's a computational method, tool, or algorithm that can be invented anywhere, to the consumer, medicinal chemists, at the vending machine, which is a series of design tools that they're already using. As far as these tools concerned, they're a combination of vendor supply tools like E360, Pipeline Pilot, and Spotfire, as well as in-house applications that have been designed for specific tasks. So move it for 3D design, IDEA for library design, and PCAP for 2D design and analysis. This is possible because, like the soft drink industry, we have chosen and applied very carefully a few standards, like the size and shape of the bottle, but importantly, not what goes inside the bottle. In other words, standardization is not the level of how these components are written, because there's more than one way to solve a given problem. Standardization is at the level of the architecture, how these components interact with each other. So what we can achieve then is a system that allows new computational solutions methods to plug in existing design applications using soap surfaces. Importantly, it supports diverse implementations. The code can be different between the tool or method being plugged in and the application which houses it. For example, in MoveIt, we write that in C++ and PCAD. In Java, and for the vendor tools, we don't have access to the source code itself. The computational methods and tools can be written in whatever language, so the code base is not shared, and the code actually runs on the server. So paradoxically, the solution to this classic problem, how do you sustain computational innovations, is through the application of standards. It's ironic that something as wild and as untamed as computational innovation can be unleashed by something as mundane as standards and a discipline of following standards where it makes sense. So I'm going to zoom in on just a couple design applications in more detail, one being MoveIt, as I say, for 3D design, and PCAD for 2D design. But first, let's take a closer look at the bobbing pen itself. This is the CCT service process. There's a publisher application, which essentially is where the computational solution is wrapped into the CCT framework for downstream consumption. Typically, a CCT service is a script set of instructions. It could be a shell script or a Python script, something like that, that has certain inputs and outputs which are defined, the file form is defined, and if there are any parameters, we also code those in as well. So once it's been wrapped into CCT, then this protocol with all the description appears client side on the design application, in this case, MoveIt. So by following this process, what's preserved is the metadata about the method itself. And you can see in the protocol tree, in this case in MoveIt, a series of different tools which have been published, and you can decide which tool is most appropriate for the task at hand. And you can see the description of the algorithm or the method, who wrote it, links to documentation, and so forth. So there are many benefits to having a system like CCT behind the scenes, stitching together innovation and the applications. The first to the software developer of the application. First is that new functionality can be plugged and played into the system without changing the code base itself, the client application. It keeps the client application fresh and relevant because you can harness these new functionalities which can be developed wherever. Novel functionality that's been carefully tested and can almost instantaneously appear in the applications in a way that makes the applications very easy to develop and maintain. Secondly, CCT services handles the execution itself on the server side. That means if there are specific requirements for what kind of platform the method runs on, for example, Linux versus Windows, if there are licensing considerations, the tokens are handled behind the scenes. Based on the nature and size of the job, CCT decides, is there a machine that I can run this on immediately, or is it too big to run immediately on a single machine? We need to farm this out, batch it up, and run it on a grid through a particular queue. As you'll see, now we have an Amazon Cloud option as well. If you're the inventor or creator of a new computational tool, there are many benefits. Probably the most important is that CCT supports many different programming languages, so the creator of the tool can use whatever is most familiar to him or her. That fosters innovation. Also, the creator of the tool can have a peace of mind that knowing once it's written, that the results are presented in a consistent way in a multitude of different interfaces. It also has the benefit of reaching more customers, chemists, in a variety of places, both geographic places as well as applications and platforms. Very important is that we have production support with a capital P where it makes sense, that where it also stays out of the way where it doesn't make sense. What do I mean by this? What I mean is that CCT has production support by our IT group, which means that the framework itself is guaranteed to have support and maintenance. And the hardware necessary to run the jobs is also under the support contract with IT. But the inventor of the tool does not have to follow a formal software development lifecycle. He or she can publish new methods as they come into the system, the framework to appear in design applications. So there's sort of dividing responsibility. IT is responsible for that, for the framework of CCT and the machines that run it. The scientists are responsible for the quality, accuracy of the method. And finally, if the method itself is computationally intense, you don't have to worry about whether the client can handle it, because HTC and Amazon will do the heavy lifting for them. And there are multiple benefits to the consumer as well. First is that the design chemist can just use whatever tools and applications that they're already familiar with, probably chosen because of the task at hand. They don't have to learn a new system every time there's a new computational method available. So using these tools in that context, he or she can select proteins, ligands, atoms, preparing a job. It's a machine, you push a button, and then CCT then runs it, brings the results back in the context, often within the same visualization frame as the job submission. So the consumer, the chemist, doesn't even know that CCT is there. In a sense, CCT facilitates the concept of crowdsourcing. You can harness innovation irrespective of the source. You have code running in CCT that's from academic groups, from software vendors, and from in-house developers. What this prevents us from happening is falling the trap of non-invented here or vendor lock. Very important for the computational chemist in particular is that valuable time is not spent on data munching. No one ever went to do a PhD or a postdoc in computational chemistry, so they can spend all their time messing around with file formats, writing parsers, running routine calculations, and collating the results in Excel to present to the chemist. Instead, they should be spending the time inventing new methods and applying them to drug discovery projects. So CCT was originally conceived as a global property calculation engine. So very standard parameters that people want to know about the compounds even before they made them. So not surprisingly, the most popular calculations are such as these: rotatable bonds, hydrobond donors, acceptors, so on and so forth. Also very frequently accessed are structure-based filters, such as structural alerts that might raise flags as to potential toxicity of the molecule. More recently, we now train a series of global ADME tox models based on a standard set of battery assays that we run in the company for solubility, permeability, log D, and hERG inhibition. So CCT was in production about a decade ago, and as you can see from this graph, it's steadily grown over this decade. Now, there was a blip where usage seemed to fall before recovering and finding a new plateau. What's happening here is that this is coincidence with a resizing of our R&D organization, which included medicinal chemistry. But what the rebound tells us that now CCT is using more places, more applications than ever before, and by a higher percentage of our medicinal chemistry organization. Also, in recent years, we've put in place a set of automated data pools. So nightly, CCT accesses the latest round of project data ready to present to the project team the next morning. What this boils down to is that there's 1 million requests being processed by CCT, each of them running 800 million compounds every month at Pfizer, which I think is a pretty impressive achievement. I just want to highlight one way CCT interacts with commercial applications, in this case, pipeline pilot. CCT protocols can be wrapped as pipeline pilot components. Look carefully here. This is a structural alerts filter that appears as a widget, which can be strung together in a pipeline pilot protocol. Entire protocols can also be invoked by CCT applications that are CCT aware and can run these pipeline pilot jobs through CCT. Let me switch gears and talk about this concept of lead generation, lead transformation, which is using computers that have prior knowledge to generate new design ideas. This is different from asking computer to predict what happens if you make a specific chemical modification. In this case, the chemist already has a design objective in mind. It might be to improve a particular attribute while keeping everything constant, but having the computer suggest ideas that are more likely to accomplish that goal. So this slide might seem a little odd in terms of its look and feel, and that's because several years ago, I had help from a management consultant to build a slide to explain this concept to senior management. They got it, therefore so will you. So let's look at this slide. you have an input molecule, it could be rendered in 2D or 3D, and there's a part of a molecule that you want to substitute, and having a system suggest alternatives that can achieve the design objective. The way that works, there's a series of algorithms that will search the available chemical space for fragments that can substitute. It could be based on tacit knowledge from medicinal chemists encoded in such a way that a computer can reason over it. For example, the substitution of tetrazole for carboxylic acid. It could be following the rules of energetics, calculating what would fit and make favorable interactions or statistics, what's been substituted successfully for, or conforming to specific rules around geometry or shape. So while these fragments are being substituted, then they're collated into integrated output of new structures, which then are filtered and ranked based on your design objective. It could be novelty, affy property, or looking to optimize potency, whatever. Behind the scenes, of course, are algorithms for searching and storing, the databases for bioisospheres or crystal structures, what have you. And then what reappears in the design application are these prioritized ideas in the context of what has already been submitted in 2D or 3D. So that's the basic idea. And it turns out Pfizer, we did a survey a few years ago to see we have an embarrassment of riches of these so-called lead transformation tools, each specializing in different areas. Some are specializing in placing the core of a molecule, others the periphery, others both. There are those that work only on 2D formats, others 3D, and still others in both. So you can decide through the CCT protocol tree which one solves the problem that you have at hand and access it. Okay, I'll walk through a particular example. I mentioned that CCT protocols of this type, in a design application. This is a 3D design application called Move It. Within the Move It window, one can then access the right menu and select the ligand idea generator. And what you're seeing here is a lead that one is trying to optimize the substitution of the core. And so here you can see the protocol tree appear. This is now in the Move It application with different CCTs for idea generation that work in 3D. And again, the metadata about the protocol appears. You can see this is the Mohs scaffold replacement. It tells you a little about the method and the databases which you'll access in order to do this. This is the one you want to do. Then the job gets prepared for CCT submission. Here you're selecting a molecule and specific atoms that you want, some of which you want to keep and others that you want to substitute. So interactively within Move It before the job is run, you can see this being set up in red stipples. If you look carefully, this piece which will be preserved, and in yellow it bounds the core which you're trying to substitute for things that will fit and achieve your design objective. So now the results start coming back from CCT, trying to Move It within the same reference frame. So here's the query. Here's the first result that comes back. You can also calculate properties on this proposed compound. Here's another course and substitute. You can see that the periphery is staying the same. Another potential solution. And the final one. And this all happens essentially instantaneously from the tool and interactive in this mechanics. You push a button and just see all the summarized results in a table format. The compounds that come back aligned in such a way with the properties that you decide which ones seem to have achieved that design objective for synthesis and then test it. So that's how CCT interacts with the methods that have been wrapped into CCT. There are other ways you can design compounds to generate ideas around how to optimize a particular property, not by examining the specific compounds, the ligands, and fragments, but by using the binding site itself. In this case, the query is actually the part of the protein that interacts with a fragment that you want to modify. CCT takes the binding site, the protein, and represents it as a shape, and then decorates this shape with different colors, in this case, hydrogen bond donors, acceptors, and charges. And this colored shape becomes the query of a set of pre-computed pockets that interact with ligands to see what other binding pockets are similar in terms of the shape and the electrostatics. This is implemented with the OpenEye toolkit. here's an example of a kinase inhibitor. Here's a pyridine ring that we're looking to substitute, and this particular pocket becomes that query, which I refer to. That pocket then is used to search a database of other binding sites, and what's returned are these fragments, which are bound by pockets similar to the query pocket and stitched together with the rest of the molecule. As you might expect for the kinase inhibitor, there are other fragments which come from kinase programs, but occasionally you will also see results coming back from gene families that are unrelated to the query, and that perhaps will lead the chemists and the project team down a very interesting path. Very popular in the 3D design world is ways of flexibly aligning and overlaying ligands. We support a number of different ways to do this. Here I'm showing two here. First, if you have two inhibitors that you want to globally align, we use omega rocks, which are open-eye tools, to align, in this case, the orange molecule to the reference molecule, which is green. So omega is used to generate the different 3D conformations, and rocks perform the overlay, and this is all done interactively. If you have a common substructure, you can just directly superimpose those. CT goes off and then does the best it can to align the rest of the molecule, having the core superimposed. And one thing about chemists I find to be extremely pragmatic, and oftentimes they want to know if a certain molecular interaction has been successfully made before, and if so, exactly how it looks in 3D. So we want to facilitate this kind of searching of our global crystal structure database. So we provide interface and move it so that you can specify what types of criteria that you're looking for on the ligand side and the protein side, for example. CTD goes off and searches the database and retrieves the hits, highlighting the different atoms which match the query accordingly. Now, there are a number of examples where you might want to do this. For instance, show me all the amino arrow groups that form hydrogen bonds with carboxylic acid side chain. Or show me all the kinase ligands that form water-mediated hydrogen bonds with hinge residues. Or the example I'm showing here, which is show me all the stacking interactions between arginine side chains and aromatic rings. A few years ago, I was involved in a research project that sought to come up with a method to predict the druggability of a target based on the structure of the binding site. This is a big team effort. I'm very pleased that it was published a few years ago. We'll look at the details there, but suffice to say that given a binding site, three-dimensional structure of a binding site, it is scored with two key parameters. First is the percent hydrophobic relative to the entire binding site, and the other is the curvature of the binding site. The idea being deeply curved and mostly hydrophobic binding sites are more likely to support high affinity binding of ligands of a drug-like size, molecularly or better. So at the time, after we wrote a series of applications to do just that, we distributed executables in a tar file to anyone interested in running it, but we warned them that it's a finicky piece of software, there's no user interface. What actually we suggested was, go consult a local expert who was trained in running this application, which was called Pfizer. So that was several years ago. Now with the advent of CCT, we can now publish the Fido algorithm and move it to three-dimensional design application so that anyone, computational chemist, a chemist, can specify the target and the ligand, if the cofactor substrate that defines the binding site, push a button, and then what returns back and move it are the Fido results. Druggability score, the maximum achievable theoretical binding energy, surface area characteristics in polar and nonpolar terms, and the curvature. And we provide a visualization, histograms of how your target falls among different benchmarks, druggable, known druggable targets, and targets that have been prosecuted by us and others without much success in the past. We've also now extended CCT into the quantum mechanics world, and this is made possible because of the advent of GPU computing. So in this case, in MoveIt, you specify the torsion angle through these four atoms, prepare the job for submission, the method, the basis set, the torsion angle scan, parameters, push a button, And then in this case, because of the length of the calculation, it's running behind the scenes quantum mechanical calculations on GPUs, and the results are managed by a job status GUI that tracks, among other things, the endpoints of the calculation that you're interested in and other jobs that you've also submitted behind the scenes in a non-interactive way. The job is ready, and you can see the result of the portion scan, the energy barriers, the profile as a function of the angle. Very much in vogue at the moment is free energy perturbation methods, which can calculate a relative ligand binding affinity. In this case, we've licensed implementation called MCPRO from Bill Wilkinson's lab at Yale, and wrapped MCPRO within CCT so it can appear interactively and move it. The job is set up. These jobs are complicated. If you have two ligands that differ no more than by an atom, one is mutated, the other, you can submit it to MCPRO. Now, TCP automates all the steps necessary to set up this simulation. You need a protein prep, generation parameter files, etc. Again, this is run using that job status GUI. You can see delta G, the calculation endpoint, and other files which will come along with it, which are very useful. And this is all done with a MoveIt, which has greatly facilitated use of this particular algorithm throughout the company. Okay, I'm going to switch gears again outside of the structure-based world into the world of large-scale compound-centric data sets, or cheminformatics. I found that chemists have a voracious appetite for data, an amazing ability to keep multidimensional information somehow in their heads. But chemists also see the value of using computers for what computers do best, which is for recognizing patterns, detecting trends, reporting the odds of historical success from large in-house and external databases. I'll give you an example of how we handle this in CCT. In this case, the design application is not moved, but PCAT, a Java-based application which we've been writing for over a decade. Increasingly, CCTs are used to run the algorithms and not PCAT itself. So let me give you an example of what's in vogue right now is the concept of match multiple pairs. For those of you unfamiliar with this technique, it's essentially looking at the consequences of making a particular substitution while holding the rest of the molecule constant. If we look carefully here at this particular pair, there's a blue moving to a red while keeping the rest of the molecule constant, joined by this triple bond. And the rest of the molecule is almost the same, be anything. What we're showing is the consequence of making this substitution in a historical data set with a property of interest. In this case, it happens to be kinase activity. And so on average, in aggregate, how does making this change behave? Does it help things, hurt things, or keep things about the same? If you click here and drill, you can then see all those examples. You see again, blue paired up with the red. The rest of the molecule could be anything, so long as it's constant. You have all such examples. Where this is the case, where this is the case, the measured endpoint and the relevant difference. And this is summarize back here. So in this case, it's not like the transformation where the computer is suggesting a replacement with the consequences. But if the chemist were to make one, what's likely that would improve things? CCT has also been wired to handle polypharmacology models, and these can be very useful in case of phenotypic screening where the bioactive molecules mechanism of action is not known. So you may want to test the likelihood that it finds a battery of different proteins that you can do in silico. It's also useful for potentially understanding the molecular culprit would be for a compound that's shown adverse events. So anyway, there's enough internal and external data for us to train statistical models. These are 2D models using support vector machines for 650 discrete proteins with enough confidence that we can generate a positive finding. So CCTs and both of the results come back to PCAT again. Here's a query molecule, the putative targets with their likelihood of binding, and just for sanity check, we have the reference molecules in the training set so that you can inspect the similarity of that molecule with those other compounds known to bind those targets. During the HTS follow-up process, oftentimes one wants to see whether we can expand the chemical real estate available to a project team. Classically, you would do similarity searches or substructure search to see what might also be bioactive. But we've implemented this method called HTS Fingerprints to do it in a different way, namely the similarity in biological space. So let's examine this 2D matrix, one axis being a million or so compounds, the other 350 assays that these compounds have been tested in. And the question is, given the HTS hit that's also been tested elsewhere, are there other compounds that show a similar activity vector, if you will? So CCT then will compute these vectors and then ask which ones are highly correlated and return results with a correlation coefficient. So PCAT has been asked to do this following CCT, find such molecules that show close distance or highly correlated coefficients and the number of assays which they have in common. And the idea here is sometimes you can find bioactive molecules that don't share obvious similarity. Also in the HTS triage step, it's often useful to see whether the molecules that show up as active have been known to be frequent hitters or promiscuous compounds. So we train a statistical model on 700 historical assays to score the likelihood that something is a repeat offender that just shows up everywhere. So the scores that come back into PCAT in this table format, which has a frequent hitter score, and then the most similar molecule in the training data set and whether that is known to be a frequent hitter as well. In the top case, it's not to be, and in the bottom case, it's known to show up active in many assays, in this case, 39 assays. I mentioned that CCT plays nice with commercial applications. I'll show you one example in the case of Spotfire DXP. So Spotfire DXP has an API which we use to plug CCT services into. So this is the DXP visualization. You can select some molecules, and then a CCT protocol. In this case, it's a PERG model. And then after scoring according to that model, the results come back in DXP. There's no messing around with input and output files and file formats and that sort of thing. We've discovered that CCT is so powerful, so flexible, it's good not just for computational chemistry, but computational biology as well. This work, which we published a few years ago, is how to interpret in biological terms the consequences of different transcriptional changes, perhaps on a gene shift experiment, by leveraging information around biological networks. It's a fairly involved process involving some math. CCT handles all this on the server side. What's interesting about this particular example of causal reasoning is that not only is it a bioinformatics project, that it runs the first example of a CCT application that runs within a web framework. So it's the first web-based application that is CCT aware. Since then, other chemistry applications have also been written in web applications. Okay, I mentioned all this computation. Where does the computation actually come from? It turns out that we have HPC systems dedicated for this purpose. And so we have a reasonably sized system dedicated for medicinal chemistry with 640 compute nodes, 96 GPU slots, 40 terabytes of storage, 10 gigabit switch, and wonderful support from our engineering group in IT. Now, this system, which was put in production about a year ago, which means it's already obsolete. But having said that, we beat on it pretty hard this year. You see the number of core hours, number of jobs submitted, 50 unique accounts across all these departments within worldwide medicinal chemistry. And the focus this year has been expanding our capacity and performance of our GPUs. Even with 640 cores, we find that the HPC is often oversubscribed. This red line is the 640. The blue line are the number of jobs currently running, and green is the number of jobs queued up waiting for job slots. So clearly, as good as the system is, it's not enough to cope with peak demand. So a couple years ago, we started doing some experiments in Amazon Cloud to address this need. Ideally, just have a new platform in CCT for Amazon. And we can run these resources when we have these peak demands or with the internal hardware configurations aren't a particularly good fit with the type of algorithm or method that's being asked. In the ideal world, users shouldn't have to even be aware that their job is running on Amazon. But CCT can handle all the behind-the-scenes work of starting and stopping machines, configuring images, and transferring data, etc. This demand has been driven by the development of new algorithms. Molecular dynamics has enjoyed a renaissance recently, as I mentioned, with free energy perturbation as well. So our first experiment was to use Amazon Cloud to MCPRO services to generate three-dimensional confirmations for a public database, the Zinc database. Important for the first experiment, careful not to put any proprietary data until we had the security model worked out. In this case, over 5 million small strings starting point, and we used Omega, which is a tool that's very cloud-friendly from a licensing perspective to generate three-dimensional confirmations. Turns out this is perfect because at the time, our internal grid would choke to do this calculation. So if you handle Amazon, you do it once and then you'd be all set. And that's exactly what happened. All the user knew was that he or she had 5 1/3 million small strings, and what came back, and the job was complete with three-dimensional confirmers in the format they were expecting. Everything in between is handled by CCT in the cloud. The batching of that job, and then the running of the spinning of the instances, and the running of each batch, and then the harvesting of the results. So that experiment was a real success. We wanted to push the model even further, saying, well, what if we wanted to use spot instances? For those of you who are not familiar with the spot instances, it's like eBay. You can name your own maximum price that you want to pay for compute time on Amazon. But like Uber, there will be times of supply and demand where surge pricing will kick in, and that can vary from hour to hour. So what that means in practical terms, if the market price happens to exceed what you're willing to pay on the maximum, you lose that instance and you work, and you still have to pay for the time on that spot instance. But the benefits are that the average prices on the spot instance are much lower than what you pay on demand or reserved on Amazon. So how's our experience? Well, there's a lot of good came from this. This is a particular set of jobs for molecular simulation with enthalpy calculations, and we submitted 507 jobs on spot instances. And all but one came back successful. And the one that came back was no fault of Amazon. It was that particular complex required just more compute time. So the cost is very favorable for the whole thing, under $900, and the hourly price is mostly the minimum for those particular machines, 27 cents per hour. There were a few spikes in price, but none of them exceeded the $1 per hour that we were willing to pay. So in other words, no lost work. The downside was that with spot instances, at least the current stands, requires a lot of manual intervention for starting up. And for some reason, a few of the instances exhibited some time sync issue, which I guess is a known bug. That requires manual intervention. So that babysitting required for running on spot instances makes the situation fairly suboptimal. But having said that, the price point is extremely attractive, so we pushed it even further. And this time, we're using proprietary data, full file virtual screening in the context of a real project on Amazon spot instances. We decided how many machines that we were going to procure. This is all the compounds for which we have material available at Pfizer, so that after the virtual screen, you can follow up the hits experimentally. Some parameters of the in-house document algorithm we used, heavy atoms with hittable bonds, 200 bonds that were constraints because we believe they were important for biological activity for that particular target. Good news, the run completed in a day, and amazingly, the total cost of the experiment, full file virtual screen, was $200, 26 cents per node per hour, which, as I said, is extremely attractive. So before I wrap up, in the tradition of Steve Jobs, I just want to show you one last thing. Is now we have tablet computing with a new platform from molecular design in our ecosystem. So in the last year or two, we started developing applications which run on iOS to iPad that leverage CCT. And there's a particular application I'll finish with is the so-called Sketchpad application. So here, there are very commonly accessed properties and models like the permeability and solubility, properties like molecular weight, repeatable bond count, popular CCTs that you can pre-specify that I'm interested in. And by literally drawing the structure, calling the compound ID, instantaneously all these features come back, these attributes of your compound. Just imagine how this changes the whole dynamic in a project team meeting. before, if a new design idea came up in the context of the meeting, you have to copy the structure from the whiteboard and then run the results in between meetings and maybe email the results back or save for the next design team. Now you can do it all interactively in real time with the design discussion, so that it really fosters very rich discussion where these bucket questions and the answers come back all in a time where design project is happening. So with that, I want to finish up and thank everyone in the group for generously provided slides for this presentation. Principally Greg Bakken, who's the leader of the computational chemistry group in my department, and our partners in medicinal chemistry, in IT, technology partners for Mediate, and senior management at Pfizer. And if you're interested in finding out more, you want to contact me at my contact information on the right. So that, I'll finish and give it back to you, Kevin.
Thank you very much, Enoch, for that big gulp of computational science and cheminformatics. Again, my apologies to those viewing, because this is not a live presentation. We're recording this just a few days before the actual virtual symposium goes out live. So I'll take the liberty of just asking Enoch a few questions before we wrap up. Enoch, first, I wonder if you could just quickly step way back. You've been at Pfizer 15 years. Where has the implementation of CCT really made the biggest impact on the company and its drug pipeline? I wonder if you can sort of put a finger on it. Is it improving the speed or the go, no-go decision, a phrase we hear a lot about? Is there one particular area where it really is excelling and transforming the whole process of drug development?
Single way that CCT has facilitated the drug discovery process certainly makes it more efficient, because less time is being asked of the medicinal chemist and the computational chemist to process results of molecules that could be made. So I guess in the design phase, you can very quickly test certain design hypotheses by using the battery resource tools and methods, so you can quickly find out which avenues will be most productive. As our synthetic capacity has shrunk over the years, the importance on design effectiveness and the suite of computational techniques, which I alluded to here, I think is part of that solution of how to maintain the output from medicinal chemistry without necessarily putting as many compounds into the process of design, synthesis, and testing. So I think it's the sum total of all these innovations and efficiencies that I think has made the collective impact for our chemistry group here.
You mentioned medicinal chemistry, Enoch. Fair to say there's still an important role for medicinal chemistry, because you showed so many, a number of very impressive examples of chemical structures being iterated and new candidates being identified almost in real time. There's still a role for that human intuition?
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, I think the infrastructure works best if it's in concert with the medicinal chemistry intuition. Like I said, chemists have this amazing ability to keep all these multi-dimensional properties in their head. But chemists are now also very comfortable, like I say, by using computers to do what they do best, keeping track of historical data, these match molecular pairs, these somewhat non-obvious effects, and importantly, because chemists are very evidence-based, backing up with the data to prove that that might be so. So I don't think these the role of computation and intuition are at odds with each other. In fact, the avenues which are then opened up by computation then allow the chemists to apply their intuition as they follow up these new chemical series and chemical options.
My final question, a two-part question, is to just quickly talk about your experience with cloud computing, which I suspect will be a theme we hear more about during the course of the virtual symposium today. Your experience seems to be primarily with Amazon. I'm curious if you've been tempted to try any of the other big clouds that we are bombarded with advertisements for. Microsoft, Google, IBM, everybody's getting in on this game now. And second, given the success and the efficiency of the cloud, I'm curious whether is there even a need to maintain your own HPC system in-house when you've had so much success spinning up jobs into the cloud?
To answer the first part, we've had the most experience at Amazon, particularly in computational chemistry. We know we're not alone in Big Pharma having made some nice progress with that particular platform. On the genomics side, computational biology, I'm intrigued by the Google offering, particularly as they have a business around Google Genomics at the moment. So I think we'll use the platform that has the most features that's suitable for the task at hand. I should also say that with the Amazon platform, there's a number of specialty solution providers, vendors that have the expertise that can act as a specialist in this space for a company that doesn't have necessarily the cloud engineering capability in-house. But in both areas, I'm very interested in what the different cloud providers are offering. And I think we'll pick the platform that makes the most sense for us being a virtual solution. There's obviously you can choose as you go. As far as the internal HPC, I think there's always, I think, a need for the on-demand type calculations where having, like I said, some of the most attractive price points come in spot instances. As it stands now, this might change in the future. That requires that babysitting. I think just in practical terms, there's no way that we can do that for the vast majority of the jobs that showed you that these 800 million compounds being processed through CCT each month. So I think there are special types of simulations or calculations for which the cloud makes sense because they have been select the right hardware configuration. They would soak up the grid, the internal grid, if we ran more than one of them at a given time. So having that as an outlet allows the more routine transactional jobs to run on the cloud, on the internal grid in the cycle times that chemists are expecting.
Okay, Enoch Huang, thank you so much. We'll leave it there. That's been Enoch Huang, Executive Director of Computational Sciences at Pfizer, getting us off to another great start here at the CNN Virtual Symposium, which will continue for the rest of today. Thank you, Enoch, and thank you all for tuning in, and apologies that this was not a live presentation, so we couldn't take live questions. There'll be more great talks, a couple of talks at the top of the hour, and we encourage you to stay tuned for those, as well as stroll now to the virtual exhibit hall where you can interact with our sponsors and exhibitors and media partners. There's also a virtual lounge where you can network with other visitors here from around the world. And new this year at the Virtual Symposium, a virtual career fair produced in concert with our colleagues at the American Chemical Society, where I'm sure there's a lot of great openings available for you to peruse. We're live on Twitter at hashtag CENSym15, CENSym15, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day and the great talks that we have on tap for you. So for all of my colleagues at CNN and all the people behind the scenes who put this broadcast together, thank you very much for watching. I'm Kevin Davis, and enjoy the rest of the program.